Elijah reached out to spin Aurora in her wheelchair. He thought no one was watching. But from the shadows of the mansion, William Olcott stood still, and what he did next would change all three of their lives forever. What would you have done if you saw someone bring your child more joy than you ever could? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if this already has you feeling something, hit that like button, subscribe, and share this video with someone who believes in unexpected kindness. William Olcott stood by the wall-length window, watching the morning light spill over the lawn like paint over canvas. The garden below looked perfect, as always. The hedges were clipped to geometric precision, the fountain at the center churned silently, and not a single petal strayed from the white roses flanking the path. William had paid a team to maintain that illusion. Perfection. Control. Stillness. Behind William Olcott, a 10-seater dining table sat untouched. Not a crumb or stain. Not a chair pulled slightly out of place. The home staff followed instructions well. Everything was quiet. Too quiet. And lately, even the silence didn't obey the way it used to. From down the hallway, William heard the familiar whirring sound of rubber wheels on marble. The soft electric motor. The rhythm of a child used to maneuvering her world without help. Aurora was awake. William didn't turn. He never did, unless he had something prepared to say. And he never did, unless it was necessary. Aurora Olcott didn't expect morning greetings from her father anymore. Their interactions had reduced to glances, logistical updates from nannies, and brief nods across dinner tables neither of them truly sat at. Aurora had grown quieter over the years. The wheelchair accident, no, not accident, the event, had done more than paralyze her legs. It had pulled William and Aurora into different corners of the same empty house. William buried himself in his companies. Aurora buried herself in books, in music, in imaginary worlds with characters who stayed. William provided everything: nurses, tutors, adaptive technologies. Everything except presence. And somehow, Aurora never asked for it either. William reached for his phone, scanning an email marked urgent, Zurich board call delayed. His schedule had opened slightly. A rare thing. But he didn't move from the window. His eyes lingered on the path that cut through the garden to the side gate. The intercom would buzz soon. It always did just before noon. 6 blocks away, Elijah adjusted the strap on his insulated food bag and kicked his scooter back into gear. The left mirror hung crooked, a recent casualty from a speeding SUV. Elijah's jacket was damp from the leftover drizzle, but he didn't mind. Deliveries paid double in these neighborhoods. Tips weren't guaranteed, but hope was free. The Olcott estate was his final stop before break. Elijah had seen the place before, on local news clips, even in that real estate magazine in Mr. Fernandez's barbershop. But up close, the gate looked less glamorous and more final. Like it was made to keep people like Elijah out, not just protect the ones inside. Elijah pressed the call button and cleared his throat. Delivery for Olcott residents, Elijah said, adjusting the food bag for the camera. A metallic click, and the gates opened without a word. Elijah blinked. No directions. No voice on the other end. Just a long stretch of driveway curving toward the mansion like it didn't want to be found easily. Elijah followed the path slowly. The tires of his scooter hissed slightly over the damp stone. When he reached the front steps, Elijah knocked twice, then once more. The door was clean. Not just clean, sterile. No doorbell. No knocker. No sound. He waited. Seconds passed. No response. Elijah knocked again, harder this time, then hesitated. From somewhere beyond the house, music floated into the air, soft and string-laden, the kind that played in movies about people who wore gloves to dinner. Curious, Elijah walked cautiously around the side of the house, past a trimmed hedge and a long shallow pond with floating lilies. That's when Elijah saw her. Aurora Olcott sat in a wheelchair near the center of the stone courtyard, her bare feet resting on a padded footplate, and a long red scarf tied around her right wrist. Her dark hair hung loose over her shoulders, and her hands moved with rhythmic familiarity against the wheels. Aurora spun slowly to the music, her eyes half closed, smiling to herself as she turned and turned. Elijah stopped walking. Aurora didn't look startled. She looked alive. Not like someone caught off guard, but like someone caught in a moment that was already rare enough without being interrupted. When Aurora noticed him, she slowed to a stop but didn't seem bothered. "You look confused," Aurora said. Elijah blinked. "I knocked." Aurora gestured to the empty chair beside her. "No one answers around here." "I brought lunch," Elijah said, holding up the bag. Aurora motioned to the small table near her chair. "You can set it there." "Thanks." Elijah placed the bag down gently and wiped his palms on his pants. "Nice music." "Tchaikovsky," Aurora replied. "From the Nutcracker." "Ah," Elijah said, pretending to know it. "Sounds classy." Aurora laughed softly. "You don't have to lie." Elijah smiled and took a step back, unsure whether to leave or say something else. The silence between them wasn't awkward. Just open. "You dance?" Aurora asked. "Not unless I'm alone. And it's dark. And I'm sure no one's filming." Aurora tilted her head. "I'm a terrible dancer too. But sometimes I dance anyway." "You don't look terrible." "You haven't seen the turns," Aurora said, and with a slight push on the wheel rim, she spun in a wide arc, the scarf trailing behind her like a ribbon. "You want to try?" Aurora asked, holding out her hand. Elijah stared. "Me? No one's watching," Aurora said. He hesitated, glanced around the garden. No cameras. No staff. Just Aurora's outstretched hand and the sound of violins in the air. Elijah took her hand. Aurora wheeled backward slightly, guiding Elijah into a slow, imperfect circle. Elijah stepped awkwardly, then found a rhythm. He moved with her, not leading, not following, just matching her pace. The two of them turned beneath a vine-covered pergola. Aurora laughed again, light and effortless. It wasn't a pity laugh. It was a real one. The kind of laugh Elijah hadn't heard from someone his age in a long time. He smiled. Aurora looked up at him. "You're not so bad," Aurora said. "You're just being polite," Elijah replied. "Maybe. But thanks for the dance." Before Elijah could answer, the music ended. And the world shifted. From the far edge of the patio, a figure stood still. William Olcott stood just beyond the glass doors, his face unreadable. Elijah's body tensed. Aurora didn't move. She only said, "Dad, this is Elijah." William didn't speak. His gaze flicked from Aurora to Elijah, then back again. William Olcott turned and walked away. Elijah stood frozen in the quiet aftermath, still holding the corner of Aurora's scarf between his fingers. The music had stopped. The movement had stopped. And William Olcott had disappeared into the house without a word. No welcome, no anger, no warning. Aurora let go of Elijah's hand gently and wheeled herself backward a few inches. "Don't worry," Aurora said, her voice soft but certain. "He's not going to say anything. Not right away, anyway." Elijah watched the empty doorway. "Is he always like that?" Aurora gave a small smile. "Only when he's breathing." Elijah wasn't sure whether to laugh or feel bad. He stepped back instinctively. "I should go. I didn't mean to cross a line." "You didn't," Aurora said quickly. "It's the first time I've danced with anyone in 2 years. I'm not letting you walk away guilty for that." Still, Elijah nodded and turned toward the path. His steps felt heavier than when he arrived. The beauty of the garden had faded into stillness again. Before Elijah reached the gate, he looked over his shoulder. Aurora was still watching. Inside the house, William Olcott sat in the corner of his office, a leather folder open in front of him, unread. The morning's documents were scattered across the table: quarterly projections, client memos, schedules that had once felt urgent. But William Olcott wasn't reading. His fingers rested on the closed laptop, motionless. The image of Aurora, smiling, laughing, spinning in rhythm with a stranger, played in his mind like a memory on repeat. It wasn't the wheelchair that startled him. It was her joy. William hadn't seen Aurora move like that in years. The wheelchair had become an extension of her body, but joy? That had become a stranger in the house. And the boy, Elijah, as Aurora had called him, wasn't part of any plan. William Olcott had spent the last 6 months arranging therapies, advanced robotics consultations, even a customized adaptive dance tutor Aurora refused to meet. Yet a delivery boy had walked into the garden, and without effort, cracked open something no professional had even touched. William closed the laptop. He stood and walked down the hall. Aurora sat by the window, scarf resting in her lap like a sleeping flame. Her fingers moved over the soft threads as if they still carried Elijah's warmth. The sound of William's footsteps was unmistakable, measured, decisive, louder than the music had been. Aurora didn't turn around. William Olcott paused in the doorway of his daughter's room. "That was unexpected," William said. Aurora replied without emotion. "So was the dance." William took a step in. "Who is he?" "His name is Elijah. He works for Quickcart." William processed the answer like data. He shouldn't be in the garden. He brought lunch. I invited him to stay. I noticed. Aurora turned in her chair to face him. Her eyes were calm, but sharp. He made me smile today. That shouldn't bother you, but it does. William didn't answer immediately. Instead, his eyes moved to the scarf in her lap. It was her mother's, Rebecca's. Worn during ballet rehearsals, still scented faintly of lavender. "That scarf," William said quietly, "hasn't left your drawer in over a year." Aurora's voice dropped, but it didn't tremble. "I forgot what it felt like to feel pretty." William stepped back. The words landed harder than any accusation. "I have meetings," William said flatly, and disappeared again down the hall. That night, Elijah sat on the hood of his scooter in the back alley behind his apartment complex, staring up at the dull glow of streetlights. The city was still moving, still shouting, still alive in the way expensive neighborhoods never seemed to be. He replayed the dance in his mind. Aurora's laugh. The way her hand felt in his. The way her father had looked at them. Elijah didn't know if he'd crossed a line or lit a fuse. Maybe both. But he couldn't shake the feeling that he had stepped into something deeper than just a delivery route. He didn't know how or why, but something had shifted. The next morning, Elijah's app buzzed earlier than usual. A new order, express delivery. Same address. Olcott Residence. Elijah blinked. The item was small, prepaid, no tip included. He hesitated for a long time before accepting. When Elijah arrived at the gate, it opened before he pressed the button. That had never happened before. The driveway felt different this time. Familiar, but heavier. At the front entrance, the door was open. A woman with a clipboard stood there. "You're Elijah?" she asked. Elijah nodded. "Mr. Olcott is expecting you. In the solarium." Elijah raised an eyebrow. "The what?" The woman didn't smile. "Third hallway to your right. Last door." Elijah followed the directions. He passed paintings in gold frames, vases taller than his apartment's windows, and rugs that looked too perfect to step on. When Elijah reached the solarium, the glass doors were ajar. William Olcott sat alone, a teacup untouched in front of him. "Come in," William said, without looking up. Elijah stepped in slowly. "Sir, I wasn't trying to disrespect." "You dance." William interrupted. Elijah blinked. "Not really." "You danced yesterday." Elijah nodded once. Yes, sir. William finally looked up. Aurora laughed. I haven't heard that sound in years. Elijah didn't know what to say. William studied him. How long have you been delivering? 6 months. On and off. You go to school? Graduated high school last year. Saving for community college. You have family? A little. Mostly just me. William leaned back. You think kindness is enough to fix someone? No, Elijah said, choosing his words carefully. But sometimes it's enough to start something. William's jaw twitched. The room was quiet. The air hung between them like a question. I'm not here to ask for anything, Elijah added. Just, she looked happy. That's all. William nodded slowly. You'll be back tomorrow. Same time. You'll bring lunch. Elijah's eyes widened. You're giving me the delivery again? I'm giving Aurora the choice. William stood. That's all, William said. Elijah turned to leave. And Elijah, William added, next time, wear better shoes. You step on her footplate again, and I'll throw them in the fountain myself. Why do you think William Alcott changed his mind about Elijah? Was it guilt, admiration, or something deeper? Let us know in the comments. Aurora Alcott stared at the closed door for a long time after William Alcott left her room. The words still rang in her ears. I'm giving Aurora the choice. The choice. It was rare for William to frame anything that way. Usually, choices came wrapped in schedules, in approvals, in carefully worded suggestions by caregivers. This time, it had come with no speech. No list. Just permission. But the strangest part? Aurora wasn't sure what to do with it. Elijah arrived the next day exactly at noon. A different meal this time. Thai food, 2 sets of containers, and fresh lemonade. He had almost backed out that morning, nerves twisting in his gut. But something stronger had pulled him back. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was Aurora. The gate opened automatically again. Elijah walked the path without his scooter this time. He wanted to arrive on foot. Less noise. More respect. When he reached the side garden, Aurora was already there. She was reading a book in the shade of the pergola. The red scarf was tied loosely around her hair now. She looked up and smiled, then quickly tucked the bookmark between the pages. You came back, Aurora said. Didn't think I would. Elijah asked. I wasn't sure you'd want to. Elijah handed over the food. I figured if I didn't, your dad might send a SWAT team to collect me. Aurora laughed, a short, real laugh. You hungry? Elijah asked. Aurora nodded. Starving. Elijah pulled one of the chairs over and sat beside her. They ate quietly for a while, each watching the wind move the ivy on the garden wall. It was peaceful. Easy. But the longer the silence stretched, the heavier something began to feel. Elijah noticed it first. Aurora wasn't smiling the same way she had yesterday. Her posture was tighter. Her eyes flicked to the house more often. You okay? Elijah asked. Aurora stirred her lemonade with the tip of her straw. Yes. No. I don't know. Elijah waited. Aurora finally said, My dad asked me if I wanted you to come back. Oh, Elijah replied, unsure what else to say. I said yes, Aurora added quickly. But now I feel like it's some kind of test. Like I'm being watched. Maybe you are, Elijah said honestly. But that's not your fault. It still changes everything, Aurora whispered. Yesterday felt like freedom. Today feels like a permission slip that might expire at any moment. Elijah didn't know how to answer that. So he didn't. He just reached over and placed his hand gently on the edge of her chair, not touching her, just near. Close enough that she knew he was there. I like dancing, Aurora said, quietly. It made me feel seen. You are seen, Elijah replied. No, Aurora said. I mean the real me. Not the daughter in the chair. Not the girl everyone avoids making eye contact with. You didn't flinch. Elijah looked her straight in the eyes. Because I wasn't seeing the chair. Aurora smiled again, but it faded quickly. My father doesn't know what to do with that. With someone who doesn't follow his rules, but somehow gets past the walls anyway. I wasn't trying to, Elijah said. I just followed the music. Aurora looked at him for a long moment, then leaned her head back against the chair. You're the first person who didn't try to fix me or explain me. I'm the last person qualified to do either, Elijah replied. They sat in quiet again, but this time it wasn't awkward. It was knowing. Inside the house, William Alcott stood behind the curtains of the living room, watching from a distance. He couldn't hear their words, but the way Elijah leaned in when Aurora spoke, attentive, not pitying, caught his attention. William clenched the curtain slightly. He had seen that look before. Not from Elijah, but from Rebecca. The way Rebecca used to watch Aurora when Aurora performed recitals on the living room carpet. That proud, aching gaze of someone who saw more than a daughter, someone who saw a whole soul. William turned away and poured himself a drink. It was irrational. Elijah was a delivery boy. An outsider. Temporary. But so was grief. And grief had lived in William's chest for years. Aurora had never needed saving. Aurora had needed presence. William had offered silence. Now, someone else was filling the space. That night, Aurora sat by her bedroom window, listening to the rain tapping the glass. A knock came at her door. William stepped in, holding a small velvet box. Your mother's earrings, he said, placing the box on her desk. She wore them on our 2nd anniversary. Aurora opened the box. Pearl drops. Simple. Elegant. Aurora had never seen them before. I thought you should have them, William said. Aurora's voice was guarded. Why now? William looked toward the floor. Because I saw something in you yesterday I hadn't seen in a long time. And because I realized, maybe I haven't given you everything you needed. Aurora's eyes narrowed slightly. Do you want something in return? No, William said. But the pause after the word was long enough to feel complicated. I don't want to lose you, William added softer. Aurora swallowed. Then don't compete with people who see me. Just join them. William didn't reply. He left the room quietly. The next day, Elijah arrived at noon again. This time, a different staff member opened the front door. No directions. No cold glances. Just a nod toward the back. When Elijah reached the garden, Aurora wasn't there. He waited 10 minutes. 15. Finally, Elijah found a note tucked under the lemonade glass from the day before. I needed a break today. Not from you. From expectations. I hope you understand. Aurora. Elijah folded the note gently and placed it in his jacket pocket. He didn't knock on her window. He didn't ask for more. He simply turned and walked away. Have you ever felt joy followed by guilt, like maybe it wasn't allowed to last? Tell us in the comments. And if this story's quiet ache is hitting you somewhere personal, don't keep it to yourself. Like, share, and subscribe for more chapters of the heart. Rain returned on Friday. Not a soft drizzle like the one Elijah had danced through that first day, but a hard hammering rain that blurred the mansion's windows and soaked the city streets until they reflected everything in reverse. William Alcott canceled all meetings. Not because of the weather, but because of something else, something that had started growing in his chest the moment Aurora handed him back the earrings and said, "Don't compete with people who see me. Just join them." The words had settled like a stone under William's ribs. That sentence had left a mark, and marks were rare in William's world. Money insulated most feelings. But not that one. Elijah was halfway to the Alcott estate when the scooter gave out. The engine sputtered at the base of the hill, groaned one last time, and died. Elijah climbed off, wiped rain from his face, and stared at the dashboard. No response. Elijah had 30 minutes left to deliver the food. No backup scooter. No time. He looked up at the hill, at the towering gates beyond the incline, and started walking. By the time Elijah reached the entrance, his jacket was soaked through and his sneakers squished with each step. The gates, miraculously, opened again without him calling. A soft click. A welcome, even if it was silent. At the top of the drive, Aurora was waiting in the doorway. "You're soaked," Aurora said. Elijah tried to laugh, but only managed to shiver. "My scooter quit on me." "Come in," Aurora said, pulling the door open wider. "Dad's not home." Elijah stepped inside for the first time. The foyer was enormous. Vaulted ceilings, hanging chandelier, marble floors so smooth he almost slipped. For a moment, Elijah didn't know where to look. Then Aurora reached for his hand and tugged him gently toward the hallway. "You need dry clothes," Aurora said. "You'll catch something." "I didn't think guests were allowed to use the house," Elijah said as they passed by portraits and vases taller than either of them. "You're not a guest," Aurora replied. "You're a friend." Elijah stopped walking. That word echoed. Friend. No one had said it out loud until now. Aurora noticed his pause and turned her chair slightly to face him. "Is that okay?" Elijah nodded slowly. "Yeah. It's more than okay." William Alcott returned earlier than expected. A storm had canceled his flight to Chicago, and the board meeting had moved online. William didn't go to his office. He went straight upstairs. From the landing, William heard voices. Laughter. Aurora's laughter. William followed the sound until he reached the guest lounge, rarely used, filled with forgotten antiques and untouched sofas. Inside, Elijah sat barefoot, dressed in one of William's old sweaters, sleeves rolled up, sipping warm tea beside Aurora. Aurora had tied the red scarf around her shoulder now like a sash, and she was leaning slightly toward Elijah mid-story. Neither of them noticed William standing in the hallway. Not yet. Elijah had been telling Aurora about a customer from his morning shift, an old woman who had insisted on tipping him with a prayer and a mint, both tucked into a Kleenex. "She said the mint was blessed," Elijah said. Aurora grinned. "Did you eat it?" I panicked and said yes. "So now I guess I'm spiritually protected against cavities." Aurora's laugh filled the room. And then she stopped. Because Aurora saw the shadow in the doorway. Elijah turned slowly. William stepped inside. The room tensed. "Your sweater suits him," William said to Aurora, eyes still on Elijah. "It was the only thing that fit," Aurora said. William nodded. Elijah stood. "I didn't mean to intrude, Mr. Alcott. My scooter." "I saw it," William said. "It's by the gate. I had it moved under the side awning. It should dry by evening." Elijah hesitated. "Thank you." William turned to Aurora. "May I speak with Elijah alone?" Aurora's expression turned guarded. "Only if it's not about kicking him out." "I didn't say that," William said. "But you thought it." William looked at her, and for the first time, didn't deflect. "Yes. I did." Aurora nodded once and wheeled out of the room without another word. William and Elijah stood in the silence. William walked to the window and clasped his hands behind his back. "I built this house to keep things safe. I hired the best doctors, best tutors, best engineers. I spent millions making sure Aurora could have every possible advantage despite her condition." Elijah said nothing. William turned. "And yet, she dances with you. She talks with you. She laughs. You did in 3 days what I couldn't do in 3 years." "I didn't try to fix anything," Elijah said quietly. That's exactly why it worked, William said. He moved closer. His voice dropped. But there are rules in this world. Unwritten ones. She's not ordinary. And neither are you. And that combination frightens me. I'm not here to hurt her. I believe that. I'm not here to stay forever either. I don't know where life's taking me. William looked Elijah in the eye. And if she wanted you to stay? Elijah didn't answer right away. Then, that would be her choice. Not mine. William studied him. Finally, William said, "You're staying for dinner." Elijah blinked. "Sir." William turned and headed for the hallway. "You're already here. Aurora will ask you anyway. Better to do it now than later." Dinner was the quietest three-person meal Elijah had ever experienced. The dining table stretched like a runway between them. William sat at one end, Aurora at the other, Elijah in the middle. The silverware gleamed. The food was perfect. The tension hung like a fourth guest. But then Aurora spoke. "Elijah said he wants to learn to cook," Aurora said, casually. "Did he?" William asked. Elijah nodded. "Just basics. Pasta. Fried rice. You know. Stuff I won't burn." William raised an eyebrow. "The chef could show you." "You'd allow that?" Aurora asked. William looked at her. Then at Elijah. "I'm considering many things these days. Have you ever found yourself unexpectedly welcomed into someone's guarded world? Tell us in the comments. And if this story's warmth is starting to melt you a bit, tap that like button and subscribe for the next turning point. The storm had passed by morning. Leaves clung to the cobblestone paths, and the sky above the Alcott estate had cleared into a thin, pale blue. The air smelled like wet soil and something else, change. Aurora Alcott watched Elijah from her bedroom window. Elijah stood beneath the archway near the fountain, talking quietly with one of the estate's groundskeepers, both laughing about something Aurora couldn't hear. Elijah wore that same second-hand jacket he always did, zipper half broken, sleeves too short, and yet, he looked more comfortable than most guests who'd ever visited the mansion. More comfortable than William Alcott ever looked at all. Aurora placed a worn photo frame on her lap. The picture inside was faded from sun and years, but the three faces were still clear. Aurora, age 8, sitting on a ballet bench. William Alcott standing beside her, his arm on her shoulder. And Rebecca Alcott, Aurora's mother, kneeling beside them both, mid-laugh. It had been taken a month before the crash. William had never told Elijah much about Rebecca. Not directly. But on Sunday afternoon, when Aurora insisted Elijah stay for tea again, William did something uncharacteristic. He stayed too. Aurora had been showing Elijah a wooden keepsake box. It was small, carved with vines and music notes. The latch clicked when it opened, revealing a tiny pink ribbon, a backstage pass, and a ballet shoe charm. "This was my mom's," Aurora said, running her thumb over the ribbon. "She taught at a dance studio near the lake. Kids called her Miss B." Elijah looked up from the ribbon. "She sounds like the kind of person who didn't sit still much." Aurora smiled. "Not once. Not even when she was mad." William cleared his throat gently. "She was fearless." Elijah looked over at William, surprised by the softness in his tone. "She'd sneak Aurora into dress rehearsals. Let her sit under the bleachers and copy the dancers," William said. "I used to say she spoiled her too much." "You did," Aurora replied. "She used to say that joy was more important than routine," William continued, his eyes lost in the memory. "That sometimes you had to make space for wonder." "And then she died," Aurora said bluntly. The room went still. "I remember the night," Aurora added. "The argument. The silence. The phone call. Everything after that was just noise." Elijah sat back, letting the moment breathe. William Olcott didn't interrupt. Aurora leaned forward, voice lower now. It wasn't the accident that changed everything. It was what followed. Dad disappeared into his companies. I disappeared into my chair. I didn't know how to stay, William said, not defensively, but with regret. Every time I looked at you, I saw Rebecca. And the guilt, it drowned me. Aurora's voice was calm, but sharp. You let silence raise me. Elijah spoke then, not as a distraction, but to ground the air. Sometimes grief doesn't feel like sadness. It feels like running without moving. Aurora nodded slowly. William looked at Elijah, and for the first time, not as a stranger, but as someone who'd survived something too. Your mother? William asked. Elijah didn't flinch. She left when I was 10. My dad stuck around for another 3 years, but not really. I've mostly raised myself. Where do you live now? Aurora asked gently. Studio apartment above a laundromat, Elijah replied. It smells like bleach and dryer sheets, but the roof doesn't leak, and the landlord doesn't care if I fall asleep with the TV on. Aurora smiled at that. William leaned back in his chair, studying the boy in front of him. You've had to build your own world. I just want one that feels honest, Elijah said, even if it's small. There was something in that sentence that lingered. Later that night, William found himself back in the home office, the lights dimmed. He opened his desk drawer and pulled out a folder he hadn't touched in years. Inside were Rebecca's letters, handwritten, sealed with little ink stars, the kind she used to doodle when she was thinking. He opened one. If something happens to me, please tell Aurora that none of this was her fault. Not the silence. Not the sadness. And not your retreat. William folded the letter again, held it in his lap. He sat like that for nearly an hour. Elijah didn't come the next day. No delivery request. No message. Aurora waited near the back patio from noon until almost 2. The sun rose high, and still, the path stayed empty. She checked the Quick Cart app. No recent orders under Olcott. Nothing pending. Aurora wheeled back inside, trying to ignore the heaviness in her chest. That night, she found a small envelope under her teacup, slipped there by one of the new staff. The handwriting on the envelope was shaky. Inside was a folded napkin with a message scribbled in pen. Didn't want to overstep. Didn't want to disappear either. Just giving you a break from eyes that don't blink. Elijah. Aurora smiled. She wheeled to her dresser, took the napkin, and placed it inside her music box. 2 days later, Aurora woke to a new alert on her phone. Quick Cart notification, 1 scheduled delivery to Olcott residence, ETA 12:15 p.m. Elijah was coming back. When Elijah arrived, he didn't head to the garden. Instead, he knocked gently on the front door. This time, William answered it himself. Elijah, William said. Mr. Olcott. The two stood for a moment in an unusually neutral silence. William stepped aside. She's in the sunroom. Elijah paused. Actually, could we talk first? William nodded once and gestured toward the study. They walked in. Elijah didn't sit. I don't want to overstep, Elijah said, but I feel like something important is happening between Aurora and me. I don't know what to call it. I don't know what she feels. But I know it matters. And I want to respect that. William took a deep breath, then spoke carefully. You think feelings are enough? I think feelings are the only thing that ever mattered to her. William nodded. Don't break her. I'd rather break myself first, Elijah replied. Do you believe people from completely different worlds can truly understand each other? Let us know in the comments. And if this story is bringing up something real, click like, subscribe, and keep following where the heart leads. Sunlight filtered through the wide glass panels of the sunroom, warming the corners of the floor where the tiles always felt cold in the mornings. Aurora Alcott sat with her legs tucked beneath a blanket, her wheelchair pulled beside the lounge chair instead of under her. Her fingers absent-mindedly tapped a rhythm on the armrest as the door creaked open. Elijah stepped inside. Aurora didn't look up right away. "I wasn't sure if you'd actually come back," Aurora said softly. "I told your father I would," Elijah replied, walking closer. Aurora finally lifted her gaze. "That's a strange reason to keep a promise." Elijah smiled. "It's not the only reason." That softened her. Aurora motioned toward the chair across from hers. Elijah took the seat, setting the paper bag down on the table between them. "No food this time," Elijah said. "Just something I wanted to show you." Aurora tilted her head. "Show me." Elijah pulled out a small sketch pad from his jacket pocket. The pages were worn and slightly smudged, the binding loose at the top corner. He opened to a page with a pencil drawing of a garden path. The detail wasn't perfect, shadows slightly off, proportions a little uneven, but it was unmistakably the Alcott estate courtyard. "You drew this?" Aurora asked. Elijah nodded. "From memory. The day I saw you dance." Aurora stared at the page. Her hands stilled. Her lips parted, but no words came. "I don't have much," Elijah said. "But I've got a pencil, and sometimes it's the only way I know how to hold on to something that matters." Aurora reached out slowly and touched the edge of the paper. "It's beautiful," she whispered. Elijah's voice lowered. "You made it beautiful." Aurora didn't reply. Not with words. She reached over and gently rested her hand over his. Later that afternoon, Aurora took Elijah to the East Wing, an area even most of the staff didn't venture into. The hallway was long, lined with paintings William had collected years ago. At the end, a set of double doors opened into a room filled with old costumes, fabric bolts, and mirrors. "This was my mom's studio," Aurora said. "She used to choreograph here. Sometimes for students, sometimes for herself." Elijah stepped inside reverently. "Why don't you come in here more often?" "Because for a long time, it felt like stepping into a memory that didn't want me anymore." Elijah turned toward her. "And now?" Aurora shrugged. "Now I think, maybe it missed me." She wheeled further inside, stopping near a rack of old ballet skirts and a cracked full-length mirror. Elijah wandered to the piano in the corner, ran his fingers over the yellowed keys. "You play?" Aurora asked. "No. But I pretend," Elijah said. "If you hum something, I can mash keys in rhythm." Aurora laughed. "That's the most honest description of piano playing I've ever heard." Elijah tapped out a clumsy version of the first bars of Clair de Lune. Aurora recognized it instantly. Her eyes lit up. "That's Debussy." "I can't pronounce it, but yeah." Aurora hummed the melody softly, her voice barely above a whisper. Elijah tried to follow her notes, stumbling through the progression with both concentration and amusement. "I think we just invented a new style of duet," Aurora said. "A bad one." Elijah guessed. Aurora smiled. "A real one." They stayed in that room for over an hour, talking, laughing, humming. For the first time in years, the studio didn't feel like a shrine. It felt like a room with air again. With life. That evening, William Alcott passed the door to the East Wing on his way to the library. He paused when he heard it. Music. But not from a speaker. From a piano. And then, a laugh. Aurora's laugh. William stood there, one hand on the doorknob, heart thudding slowly, not from anger or concern, but from something he hadn't felt in years. Longing. The next day, Elijah arrived with 2 sandwiches and an umbrella. Aurora sat on the front steps this time, scarf tied neatly around her braid. "You walked again?" Aurora asked. "I like the uphill battle," Elijah replied. "Makes me appreciate the rest." Aurora grinned and took the sandwich. You should be in a philosophy class. I'd flunk out. But I'd charm the professor before I did. Aurora leaned back against the railing, taking a bite. Elijah sat beside her, silent for a few minutes. Then he spoke. I don't know where this is going, Elijah admitted. But I keep showing up because every time I leave, it feels like I forgot something important behind. Aurora looked at him, her expression unreadable. I don't want to overstep, Elijah continued. I'm not asking for anything. Just permission to keep being here. Aurora's voice was quiet. You already have that. The words weren't dramatic, weren't loud, but they landed in Elijah's chest with full weight. Aurora reached for her phone and played the song from their first dance, Waltz of the Flowers. Elijah smiled. I still can't dance, Elijah said. That's fine, Aurora replied. I still can't walk. Elijah stood and offered his hand. Aurora took it. They moved again, awkward, graceful, imperfect, honest. Have you ever found healing in something as simple as showing up, again and again? Tell us in the comments. And if your heart's beating just a little slower now, a little deeper, like and subscribe. The next act will test everything they've built. Thursday arrived too quietly. The weather had changed again, hotter, heavier. The sun pressed against the mansion's glass walls, drawing lines of light across the marble floors. Aurora Olcott waited near the window, fingers twisting the red scarf in her lap. Elijah was late. 15 minutes turned to 30. No message. No call. Aurora wheeled back from the window, stared at her phone, then placed it face down on the table. This wasn't like Elijah. Even when Elijah's scooter had broken down, he had arrived wet, cold, apologetic, but present. That's what Elijah had always been. Present. Until now. Across the city, Elijah sat alone on the steps of a county building, a yellow folder in his hand. The words at the top of the page read local housing application, secondary approval required. His lips were pressed together in frustration. I just need another week, Elijah muttered under his breath. One more week. But time didn't wait for delivery boys with late rent and overdue documents. The landlord had made it clear that if Elijah didn't submit the paperwork and payment by Friday, the unit would go to someone else. And Aurora didn't know. Because Elijah hadn't told her. Because telling her would mean showing her what he had spent his entire life hiding, his instability, his uncertainty, his lack. And Elijah wasn't ready to let that be part of her world. Not yet. Maybe not ever. William Olcott noticed Aurora's silence by evening. At dinner, she didn't play with her fork like usual. Didn't hum music under her breath. Didn't ask for Elijah. She didn't need to. William cleared his throat, setting his napkin down. He didn't come. Aurora shook her head. Did he text? Aurora didn't answer. William leaned forward slightly. Would you like me to have someone check? No, Aurora said quickly, a little too sharply. He's not a package that went missing. William nodded slowly. I didn't mean it like that. Aurora pushed back from the table, her voice lower. Yes, you did. You just don't see how much you still try to control things. I see how much you care, William said. And I'm trying not to get in the way of it. Aurora stood, gripping the wheels of her chair tightly. Then stopped waiting for him to fail. William's silence was answer enough. Elijah finally returned on Friday. He didn't bring food. He didn't knock. He stood outside the gate, unsure whether to walk up the driveway or turn around. His feet were still sore from hours on public transportation. His eyes were bloodshot from sleepless nights. The housing application was folded in his back pocket, unsigned. The gate remained closed. Aurora had turned off remote access. He stood there for nearly 10 minutes before the intercom buzzed. Aurora's voice came through. Elijah. His throat tightened. I'm here. I know. More silence. I was worried, Aurora said. I know. You disappeared. I didn't mean to, Elijah said, his voice barely audible. Why? Elijah hesitated. Because if I showed you who I really am, how messy, how unsure, how close to losing everything, I thought you'd look at me different. Aurora didn't respond. Elijah stepped closer to the gate. I didn't think I belonged in your world. Not really. Aurora's voice was quieter now. I never asked you to belong to my world. I just asked you to stay in it. Elijah looked down. I messed up. You lied, Aurora replied. Not with your words, but by disappearing. I was ashamed. That's still a choice. The gate didn't open. That evening, William found Aurora in her mother's studio. She was seated at the mirror, the scarf from their first dance now wrapped tightly around her hand. She'll never get to see me fall in love, Aurora said. William walked slowly to her side. But she'd be proud that you let yourself try. Aurora shook her head. I gave Elijah something I've never given anyone before. Trust. And he didn't know what to do with it. William sighed. Sometimes people pull away not because they don't care, but because they care too much and don't feel worthy of it. That sounds like a convenient excuse, Aurora whispered. It's not an excuse, William said. It's an explanation. And you don't owe him forgiveness. But maybe you owe yourself a chance to decide whether he's worth the fight. Aurora stared at the mirror for a long time. Her reflection didn't move. Elijah didn't come back on Saturday. He didn't come back on Sunday. On Monday morning, Aurora sent a single text. If you're still figuring it out, that's okay. But I need honesty more than I need perfection. There was no reply. It rained again Tuesday. The same quiet kind of rain from their first dance. Aurora sat in the garden under the canopy, a blanket over her legs, the music box open beside her. Inside, Elijah's napkin note still rested beneath the ribbon from her mother's keepsake box. Aurora didn't cry. She didn't break. But something in her shifted. Some part of the opening that had bloomed over the past few weeks, folded inward again. Not closed. Just quieter. More careful. Elijah sat in his apartment, the lights off, staring at the application on his kitchen counter. He had turned in the paperwork. Barely. The rent had been paid, with the last of his savings. He had kept the place. But the silence from Aurora felt louder than any eviction notice. He pulled out the sketchpad and flipped to the first drawing. The garden, the scarf, the curve of her smile he hadn't gotten quite right. Then the next page. A half-finished sketch of their dance. Her hand in his. But his other hand was missing. He hadn't finished drawing himself in. As if some part of him had never fully believed he belonged in the picture. Have you ever pushed someone away because you didn't feel worthy of them? Or walked away from someone who disappeared when you needed them most? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if this act cracked something open in you, subscribe, like, and hold on. The next act is the reckoning. Wednesday came with no rain. No sun either. Just a dull gray sky and still air, like the world itself had stopped breathing. Aurora Alcott sat alone in the East Wing studio, legs wrapped in a blanket, hands clasped around a lukewarm cup of tea. The piano stood quiet beside her, keys untouched since Elijah last sat there fumbling through Debussy. Aurora had always thought heartbreak would feel louder. She had expected yelling. Or crying. Or at least the dramatic slam of a door. But this silence, was far worse. It was the sound of something slowly untethering. Not cut, not shattered. Just drifting. She rolled the music box open again. The ribbon was still there. So was Elijah's napkin note. Aurora traced the corner of the paper and whispered, "Why didn't you just say something?" Across town, Elijah sat in the laundromat lobby beneath a flickering ceiling light. The machines hummed all around him, a strange comfort after days of unspoken words. His sketchpad rested in his lap, open to the last page he had drawn. A silhouette of Aurora. Not smiling this time. Just still. Strong but still. Elijah hadn't spoken to her in 6 days. Each day had its excuse. His job. The forms. The anxiety. The shame. But now all of that was used up. What remained was a single clean truth. He missed her. And missing her had become unbearable. William Alcott found Aurora that evening in the studio, staring at the scarf again. She didn't look up as her father entered. She didn't need to. William pulled up a stool beside her. He sat down slowly. "He left me," Aurora said, without bitterness. William stayed silent. Aurora continued, "He left, and I think part of me still wants to believe it wasn't on purpose. But then again, what hurts more, leaving because he didn't care, or leaving because he cared and couldn't handle it?" William set his hand on the edge of the piano. "I've done both, Aurora. And either way, it hurts the same." Aurora looked over. "What did you do when Mom left?" "She didn't leave. She died," William said. "You know what I mean." William hesitated, then answered quietly, "I chose silence. I chose distance. Because I thought protecting my pain would somehow protect you." "Did it?" "No. It built walls so high neither of us could see over them." Aurora swallowed. "I don't want that again." "Then don't let it happen," William said. "Tell him what you need. If he can't give it, you'll know. But don't leave questions open. They don't heal with time, they rot." Aurora said nothing for a while. Then she turned to her father. "I want him to come back," Aurora whispered. "Then ask him." Elijah stood in front of the mansion gate 2 hours later. He didn't have food. He didn't have flowers. He didn't even have an excuse. Just a message he had written and rewritten 4 times in his phone before deleting it again. The intercom stared back at him, blank and waiting. Elijah pressed the button. The speaker crackled. Then, Aurora's voice. "Hi." His heart skipped. "Hi." Neither said anything for a long moment. Then Aurora asked, "Why now?" Elijah breathed in deeply. "Because today, the silence felt worse than the risk." Aurora was quiet. "I messed up," Elijah continued. "I thought I was doing the right thing by sparing you the weight of my world. But that wasn't honesty. That was fear wearing a polite face." "And now?" Aurora asked. "Now I'd rather let you decide if I'm enough." More silence. Elijah waited. Finally, the gate clicked open. Inside the sunroom, Aurora sat waiting, scarf tied once more around her braid. Elijah walked in slowly. The look they exchanged said more than the days they had spent apart. "I'm sorry," Elijah said, his voice cracking. "I know," Aurora replied. "I was scared." "I know that too." Elijah stepped closer. "But I don't want to run anymore." Aurora nodded. "Then sit." He did. They looked at each other for a long moment, searching for the familiar parts, the ones that hadn't changed. "I don't need you to have answers," Aurora said. "But I do need you to stay when it gets hard." "I can promise that," Elijah said. Aurora reached for his hand. "I want to believe you," she said. "Just show me." "I will," Elijah replied. "One day at a time. As many as you'll let me." That night, Elijah didn't leave after dinner. He stayed to help Aurora organize the studio. They dusted the windowsills together, wiped down the mirrors, put Rebecca's old music sheets into folders. At one point, Elijah turned on the speaker and played the waltz again. Aurora smiled. "You remember?" Elijah offered his hand. "Always." They danced again. No grand steps. No perfect rhythm. Just a boy and a girl moving in defiance of everything they had survived. Would you take someone back if they finally showed up with truth, even after the silence? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if you believe that love is not about being perfect, but present, like, subscribe, and get ready. The final act is next. 2 weeks later, the Alcott mansion looked different. Not from the outside, its stone walls and iron gates remained unchanged, but from within, something had shifted. The curtains were open now. The windows breathed. The air carried the sound of real music, not playlists but imperfect melodies from the studio piano, sometimes with a missed key, sometimes with laughter in the middle of a song. And at the heart of it all, Aurora Alcott and Elijah. Not perfect. Not fixed. But present. William Alcott stood in the kitchen doorway, watching them from a distance. Elijah was helping Aurora reach a row of cookbooks from the upper shelf. Aurora balanced herself with one hand against the counter, laughing as Elijah nearly knocked over a stack of spice jars. "This is a disaster," Aurora said, covering her mouth. "You said you wanted to try cooking together," Elijah replied. "This is what progress looks like. Burnt garlic and bravery." William couldn't help the smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. He cleared his throat, stepping forward. Aurora looked up. "You need something?" "I was going to make tea," William said. "But if you're starting a fire in here, maybe I'll wait." Elijah looked sheepish. "One day we'll make something edible." "One day," William replied. Then more softly, "Today is good enough." It wasn't much. But it was his way of saying, "I see you. Both of you." Later that evening, Elijah sat with Aurora in the garden, the same patio where they had first danced. The music box sat open on the table, playing a soft winding tune. The same scarf from that first afternoon was tied loosely around Aurora's wrist. Faded now, but still hers. Still part of the story. Aurora held the sketchpad Elijah had left behind weeks ago. She flipped through the pages slowly, each one a memory, a step, a moment captured in graphite and paper. When she reached the final page, she paused. Elijah had finished the drawing. The one he had left half empty. Now his full outline stood beside hers, hand in hand, a sky above them and music notes rising like birds in the air. Aurora's wheelchair was there, but it wasn't the focus. Their connection was. "You finished it," Aurora whispered. "I had to," Elijah said. "That's how I knew I was ready to stay." Aurora didn't say anything at first. Then, "So what happens now?" Elijah looked at her. "I don't know," Elijah said honestly. "We'll keep dancing. Keep showing up. Keep burning the garlic. We'll figure it out." Aurora smiled. "Promise?" Elijah leaned closer. "I promise." Aurora looked toward the sky. "I think my mom would have liked you." "I hope so. She used to say love isn't about how someone walks beside you, but how they stay when you can't walk at all." Elijah reached out, took her hand gently. "I'm not going anywhere." A few months later, William Alcott hosted a small gathering at the mansion, a rare thing. No investors, no media, just close staff, a few friends, and a quiet evening in the garden. At some point in the night, someone turned on the music. Elijah stood and offered his hand to Aurora. Aurora looked at her father across the table. William nodded once. A silent blessing. Aurora took Elijah's hand and rolled out to the patio. There, under the garden lights, surrounded by people who had once only known her as the daughter in the chair, Aurora and Elijah danced again. No music cues. No instructions. Just movement. The scarf fluttered like it did that first day, only now it belonged not to memory, but to the moment. A living, breathing joy. A victory. Have you ever witnessed a love story that started small, messy, and uncertain, yet changed everyone involved? Tell us in the comments below. And if this story meant something to you, if it gave you hope, reminded you of someone, or just stayed with you. Please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who still believes in love that shows up, even when it's hard.